this thing, hypertext. The hypertext, I guess, is what he invented actually. But it's basically some text, like some text with some links in it, right? So, and this link goes to some other page out there, which is some text with some links in it, right? And that's what the web used to be before Ajax, pictures, Node, JavaScript, all that crap. It used to be text and links. And just pages full of that stuff, right? So that's like the 70s, I guess, something like that. And that's where this comes from. Hypertext means text with links in it, essentially. Okay, so the reason that's important is when this was first sort of all invented, it was created to be something called stateless. So probably Phil has mentioned this before. So basically, you are here, right? And you've got this web browser, though in the beginning it didn't really look like our web browser did. It was just like text on screen. And you're making a request out here to this server. And this request is stateless, basically. And what that means is you're going to make a request, and the server is going to send back a response, and it's going to forget all about you. It does not care about you anymore. Once it gets that request and it processes it and it sends back that response, as far as it's concerned, you're gone. You don't exist in the universe. Okay. What's that? What? Oh, okay. So that's kind of what stateless means, right? That means I'm not tracking you. You're telling me, give me this page, and I'm giving you that page. And once I've given you that page, I'm done. Okay, so that presents a problem. So in the beginning, that was fine, right? It was just, I'm requesting pages, I'm clicking on links, I'm requesting more pages, that's fine. It doesn't need to know about me. But now, we sort of expect more from the web, right? Like, we expect to be able to do stuff like go to Amazon and log in, and once we've logged in, we want it to remember who we are. We want it to be able to service a history of the pages we've gone to. We want it to be able to give us good recommendations, all that kind of stuff, right? And it can't do that if every time we request a page, it forgets who we are. So, somewhere along the line, I'm not sure exactly where, somebody decided, okay, this whole stateless HTTP thing is cool, but we really need a backdoor. We need to figure out some way to track people so that we can do cooler stuff with them. And the way that they came up with to do that was something called a cookie. So what a cookie is very simple, actually. And before I started messing with Node, like, I knew nothing about cookies or sessions or any of that stuff. I was like, it's just a mysterious black box. But the cool thing about Node is it's so low level that you basically have to do all this stuff yourself, so you have to understand how it works. So you guys should be glad you're using Node, because you get to learn this stuff, right? Okay, so what a cookie is basically, like Phil was saying earlier, okay, I'm this server, and mostly I'm going to forget who you are after I serve your request, except I'm going to store this one little piece of information about you, and I'm going to send it along with whatever you request, and you're going to send it back to me. Oh, I sort of got that wrong, actually, backwards. I'm going to send it with whatever response I make, and every time you make a request, you're going to send it back to me, and that's going to be how we track who you are, right? So let's come up with a little example. Let's come up with a little. What's up?
I have a quick question.
Sure.
Where is the cookie stored? Is it stored like in memory, or is it stored like in database?
That's an excellent question, and that is configurable. So yeah.
Oh,
Maybe was it a related question?
Yeah.
Or, yeah.
I was running browser side, server side.
Right. So that's also another sort of detail, right? So let's get to that stuff later. This, where is it stored on the server? This question is actually something that we should talk about now. So it's actually stored in both places, and that's how it's stored here on the server and here on the client. And that sort of gives you the continuity, right? Like that helps this guy know who you are, essentially. So let's go through a little sort of example request response thing, and that'll maybe make some of this stuff a little clearer, right? Okay, so let's say this is me, right? I'm this browser window. And I'm going to type something in here, HTTP something. And that's going to point to a server. And I'm going to go out here and I'm going to make this request on this server. And the first time I do this, it's not going to know anything about it, right? Because HTTP is stateless and I haven't been there yet. So I'm going to make this request. And the server is going to say, okay, you want this page. Do I have, did you also send me a cookie, right? Since it's your first time there, you didn't send them a cookie. So it's going to say, okay, you don't have a cookie. I don't know who you are. I'm going to send you the page. So this is the page. Little page graphic there. And also at the same time, I'm going to send you this cookie. Okay? Then, the next time you make a request to the same domain, what's going to happen is you're going to make your request. So let's say this is request number 1. Down here we're going to do request number 2. You're going to make your request, and you're going to send the request for the page that you want, but you're also going to send this cookie that you got last time. And the way that works is usually it's associated with a particular domain, right? So if you're going to Google, you've got a particular cookie for Google. If you're going to Facebook, you've got a particular cookie for Facebook, and you send the right cookie for the right domain. Does that make sense? So there are some exceptions to that, which is why Facebook is able to track you when you're on other websites, but we're not going to talk about that because that might not be around for very much longer anyway. Okay. So you're on this domain. You're sending a request to this domain, so you send the request for the page, and since you've been there before and you already have a cookie, you send the cookie along with it. Okay? So I'm over here on the server, and I've got some record stored somewhere about cookies and who's visited my page, right? So I'm going to look through this list, and I'm going to say, okay, I sent that cookie yesterday for this person, right? So then I'm going to know who you are, and I'm going to send back a response, possibly, which is tailored to you. Does that make sense? And also, I'm going to send back the same cookie because it's stateless, right? If I don't send this cookie back, you don't have a cookie anymore, sort of. Not entirely true, but mostly true. Okay. Does that make sense? Any questions? Should I address your question now, do you think? So Milo's question was essentially, so you've got a cookie both on the server and on the client. So that much is clear, right? So Milo's question was essentially, okay, I've got this cookie on the server. How do I store it? That's an excellent question, and I'm not going to talk too much about it, but it's worth talking about at least a little bit. So it turns out, depending on what sort of application you have, you might store it in a lot of different places. I'm going to talk specifically about Node because that's what I know and that's what's relevant to you. So in Node, there are actually a couple of pretty good options for how you store this cookie. By default, you guys have heard of Connect, right? Connect is sort of a subset of Express. Have you talked about Connect at all?
Not really.
I will erase that then. Or maybe I'll just say, you guys have heard of middleware, right? Okay, middleware. Okay, so essentially, Express is sort of the overarching framework, and Connect is sort of the thing that Express is built on top of, and it implements most of the middleware in Node. Okay, does that make sense? So it's just another, you guys know what NPM is? Node modules, familiar with all those concepts? Okay, it's just another node module. And it's basically the node module or the set of node modules now in Express 4 that Express is built on top of. Okay, makes sense? Okay, why was I saying that? I was saying that because Connect actually implements the middleware for cookies and sessions, and it gives you some options, and the default option is actually just stored in memory. Okay, so stored in RAM on the computer that serves all the requests. But you can also very easily use Redis. Have you guys talked about Redis at all? So Redis is just a very, very, very fast database. Okay, so you can store it in memory. You can store it in a database. You can also probably store it in Mongo, which you guys have talked about. Mongo is not quite as fast as Redis, but probably.
So the Connect is the memory? The
So,
middleware that handles the memory?
yes, that's correct. Yep, that's right. And it can also do these other things. So these are sort of your options for where do you store the cookie and the session on the server, right? Okay. So that's clear. Okay, so now let's maybe demonstrate a little bit of this. Are we ready to demonstrate this? Let's do a little bit more on board, and then we'll demonstrate something. Okay, so a little more about cookies. So you've got a cookie in your browser, right? And you've got a cookie on your server, and maybe your server is storing it in memory, and maybe it's storing it in a database. But what exactly is it storing, right? Like, what is on here? What is a cookie? Like, it's not this thing with chocolate chips in it, right? It's something else. What is it? It turns out what it is something called a key value pair. That terminology, who's that familiar to? Anybody? Okay, pretty much everybody. So key value pair is basically just, I've got this string. It's like JSON, right? Like JSON is mostly made up of key value pairs.
And what is it? Or JavaScript objects.
Right. Yes. JSON is a subset of JavaScript objects. Right. It's like a JavaScript object. So key value pair is basically I've got this string, and somehow that's associated with this other string, usually, right? So this is what a cookie is. Inside your browser, it's these things, and this is sort of extra, a domain that they're associated with. Remember I said you send the cookie according to what domain you're making a request on, different cookie for Google, different cookie for Amazon, those sort of things, right? So it's this key value pair and sort of a domain specifier. That's what makes up a cookie, at least on the browser side. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit about what that means and how it gets used in Express. No, don't go to sleep. Not cool, bro. Oh, okay, that's cool. Okay, are you guys familiar at all with the developer tools in Chrome? You guys use that? If you haven't, it's a good thing to get familiar with. Okay, so I just opened up the developer tools, and I went to the resources tab, and now I'm going to go over here to cookies. And remember how I talked about domains before? If I had visited more tabs, if the browser hadn't just crashed, this section might have more domains in it. It only has localhost now because that's the only place I've been to. So this is the domain that I was talking about. And in the background, I have an Express application which is set up, and it's serving one. It's got one route defined on it, and it has cookies and sessions enabled. And I've already done a request so that it already has given me a cookie back. Does that make sense? Does all of that make sense? I don't want to get too much into that yet because I want to talk about sort of the low levels of what a cookie is. Okay, so remember I mentioned it's got a string, it's got a value. When you use sessions in Express, the string associated with your cookie is always, I don't know if this is configurable or not actually, but as far as I know, it's always connect.sid. Okay? And that stands for connect.securityID, I believe. The value is always something, some really nasty string of characters that no one else is ever going to have, right? So that's the important part here. Don't worry too much about what this value is, right? The only thing that matters is that it's unique. Okay, so we've got a cookie, and on the browser it is made up of a string, which for us is always connect.sid, and a value. And for our purposes, we're going to say that this value is just a number, right? We're going to say that the first person that comes to the site gets the number 0. And the second person gets the number 1, 2, 3, and so on. Does that make sense? So this cookie is going to have this string, and it's going to associate it with this value. And this is the important part. So this is what actually identifies the user on the server. This is how the server knows who you are when you come back and they get your cookie. So somewhere on the server, we're going to store this value, this 0, and we're going to associate that, if we want to keep track of something else, with more information. Does that make sense so far? Okay. So that might be stored, like we were saying earlier, might be stored in memory, might be stored in a database, but all the server needs to know is, okay, this value is associated with this user. I'm going to look that user up somewhere, and that's going to be Waylon Flinn. And this one is going to be Bill Dye. Okay, and so on. It's going to have a mechanism for associating this particular value with some other information, which usually has a name involved. Sometimes other stuff as well. Phil's going to talk more about that later. Using a library called Passport, you can do all kinds of different stuff.
That's only was just your what is the I'm drawing a blank. The computer number, IP address.
Oh,
not your name per se.
So that's sort of separate, right?
Well, you can log in on different computers and still get information.
Sure. So right. So remember how I was saying before? You do an initial request. There's no cookie. They send back a cookie. So, and Phil is going to talk more about this when he talks about Passport. The process of logging in. This is actually slightly oversimplified because what is actually possible is 1 points to Phil Dow, but also 2 points to Phil Dow, and 3 points to Waylon Flinn. And that's kind of what enables you to log in from multiple computers, because you're gonna the server is actually going to generate a number, and it's going to send it back to you, and then when you go through something like a login process, then the server is actually going to associate that number with some entry over there. Okay, but that's kind of it's not clear exactly where the line between sessions and authentication is, but that's sort of the idea. So this is each one of these numbers is essentially associated with a session, right? And if you're on multiple computers, you can have multiple sessions. But all of those sessions are still logged in as you, right? If you go to your computer at home and you log into Google, it still knows that this session is you, even though you might be logged into a different computer with a different session, and that's also you, right? So multiple of these numbers might be associated. And so it's not actually these numbers, right? It's this nasty string over here, like this, that is just generated in such a way that it's guaranteed to be unique, right? Okay. Okay, so that's sort of the concept behind cookies and sessions. Let's look at a little bit of code. Who wants to look at code? Anybody? Sweet code. Okay, so I've got a little Express application set up here. Does this look familiar to you guys? You guys have seen all of this stuff before, probably. There's a couple of new things in here, but the general layout, you recognize it as an Express application, right? Okay. Can everybody see the text?
Maybe zoom, yeah.
Zoom a little bit more.
Yeah.
Maybe maximize it.
Well, even make the text bigger into line. Yeah, plus a few times. I use that to blow it up pretty big.
Is that good, Phil?
Yeah, I think it's good.
Okay.
I can see it.
You're the farthest back, so.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of go through this line by line and, you know, talk about what everything does, right? Then maybe comment some stuff out and see what it does to the application. This is pretty obvious what this does, right? This is how you get this is how you load the Express module. This is how you create the Express application. Are you using 3?
4.
Oh, you're using 4. Okay, so crap.
It's okay though. I mean,
Yeah,
it's similar enough.
it's a little bit different, but it's most.
It's basically the same. The only thing that's different in this file would just be like the app.listen would be like in another file. Yeah. I mean, really the big thing is that the middleware is not automatically bundled.
Exactly right. That's the big thing. You have to download the cookie parser and the session stuff separately, but that's not that big of a deal. Okay, so this creates the application. So this is 3. The newest version of Express is 4. That's what you guys have been using. I'm out of date already. Sad. So this might be the part. This might be the first thing that you guys are not that you've not seen before. So this basically creates some middleware called a cookie parser, right? So when this request comes in and it's got a cookie associated with it, this cookie has like I'm not sure if the domain information is actually sent to the server or not. Do you know the answer to that, Phil?
No.
I don't. Okay. I don't think that it is. I think that the domain information is sort of implied, right? Like you're making a request, the domain information is in the request, so it sort of knows that. So it sends this, right? It sends this key value pair, and that's in here. Have you guys talked about HTTP headers at all?
A little bit.
A little bit? Okay. So this is basically sent as part of the HTTP header, right? I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've talked about that.
Okay. So something has to parse that header, right? Express is all about like doing everything. So something has to parse the header, something has to parse the cookie, figure out that there's a cookie in there, and separate it into this string and value pair so that you can do something reasonable with it, right? Okay. That's what cookie parser does. Cookie parser handles that automatically for you. It looks at the header, looks for, I forget exactly what the header value is, but it looks for the appropriate header value, and then it parses whatever's in there, and it makes it available to you. Via, you can see right down here, this request.cookies JavaScript object. Okay? Okay. The second thing that you guys probably haven't seen before is this. Express.session. So this is what actually manages that second part where you associate these unique values that you're generating with more information for a user. Okay? Does that make sense? So that's what handles that part. And actually, let's see if I've still got it up. I'm a Mac noob. How do I exit full screen on this? Hit escape?
Command Shift F should do it.
Command Shift
Or
F.
just move your mouse to the top of the screen and hold it there for a second.
Oh, yes, that's what I needed. Thank you. Express session node. Well, I thought it was on here. Oh, here it is. Cool. So, this is the actual answer on Stack Overflow. I figured it might be cool to show this because I don't want to type all this out.
What did you Google?
What did I Google? Express session Node.js. Did that Stack Overflow thing come up for you? So I'm not actually accepted answer, but I'm the top voted answer, so that's what counts, right? Anyway, the reason I'm bringing this up is to show you this. This is sort of mostly you don't have to worry about this, especially if you're using Passport, because Passport will handle this automatically for you. But since I'm talking about the session middleware, this is what will actually get stored either in memory or in your database when Express's session middleware creates a session for you. Okay? So you. Oh, sure, absolutely.
What's the title of the Stack Overflow, by the way? Is it
how do sessions work in Express with Node.js? Did you find that?
Yes, I did.
Cool. Right. So this is how Express actually tracks your session. This is the JavaScript object that will actually get written to a database, and this is custom, right? This is, in my example, I'm adding something to the session, and what I'm adding is my name and my status. Okay. So this is all the stuff that Express adds for me. Okay, so it has information in here about your cookie, when it expires, and where you requested it, basically. Okay, so let's go back to our app. Does that make sense to everybody? Are there any questions? Okay. Okay, so that's what this does, right? This sets up the middleware that actually makes all that happen. This is the standard router stuff. You guys are probably familiar with that. And then here, just for the purposes of this example, I'm setting up a special route that actually... have you talked about implementing middleware at all?
Not really.
Okay. So this is actually a route that acts like middleware, essentially. Okay, so for all requests coming in, that's what this means. It matches everything. That's what that means. It will execute this function, right? This is our handler function. What you guys probably haven't seen yet is this next, right? So this next basically turns your app router into middleware. So, and the way that it works is, after you're done, you just call next. Pretty simple.
It turns the what?
It turns your router handler function into middleware. Okay. That's, you don't need to worry too much about that. That's sort of beyond the scope of this course.
But I think that the trick is, remember, so middleware will execute between the request coming into Express and your custom application routing code.
Right, exactly.
That's in between those. So now he's writing his own one.
Exactly. That is exactly right. Middleware basically just does a bunch of stuff between when a request comes in and when you start handling it, if that makes sense. It does stuff like parsing the cookie, parsing the headers, parsing the session, parsing the body if you're submitting forms. You guys have probably used the body parser. So this is just us implementing more middleware. Okay. And the reason I did that is to demonstrate that when you're using this cookie parser middleware, after Express parses the cookies that come in, it creates from the cookies this cookies JavaScript object. Okay? And the keys in the cookie JavaScript object are the keys in the cookies, right? That makes sense to everybody? And remember we talked about the special cookie that Express uses is called connect.sid. So what we're doing is we're looking through all the cookies for one named connect.sid, and this is sort of the basic is it defined test, if that's familiar to you guys. How do you check if a variable exists in JavaScript? That's basically what that is. So if there is a cookie named connect.sid, I'm just going to print out whatever the value of that cookie is. Does that make sense to everybody? Mm-hmm. Okay, so this is where we cross our fingers and hope that things work the way that they're supposed to. I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to refresh this page, bring that up again, show me the resources. So this is our cookie, and we should be able to go back here where the Express application is running, and if this were completely on the screen, see that what it's printing out is this value over here. Is that so? That's mostly correct. It actually starts right here. You can see that this is the same as 4IEL33BX. Does everybody see that? Not really?
You need to make it bigger.
Which one? This one?
On the left, for sure.
This one needs to be bigger?
Yeah.
Oh my God, make it bigger. That bigger too. We won't be able to see much, but we can at least verify. Oh God, that didn't help.
Like how they actually made it.
I know, right?
So you can only go to the left.
So we can see here that this, yikes, don't do, what are you doing? This part right here, so this is the string, this is the value that's associated with our cookie in the browser, right? Just ignore this S%3 and look at this S%3A actually. That's character encoding for that colon over there, so just ignore that. Starting here, 4IEL33 is who the browser thinks we are, and 4IEL33 is who the server thinks we are. That makes sense? Everybody see that? So all we did was, let's go back to our code. We just printed out whatever the value of request.cookies connect.sid was. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. So this is how the server identifies us. It's got, so when I did my first request, I wonder if I can, yes I can. When I did my first request, I didn't have a cookie at first, and I'm going to simulate that by getting rid of all my cookies. So I didn't have a cookie. I came over here and I did a request, and it's going to generate a cookie for me and send it back, and then, God, this is not easy to navigate. And then when I do, when I make another request, I'm going to send the cookie, and the server is going to know who I am. So we can go over here, hopefully. I haven't screwed things up.
You need to visit your site one more time.
I thought that I did, but I'm going to restart it just in case. And I'm going to clear this. Another important thing to know as a programmer, whenever you do a demo, it will screw up. Be prepared for that.
Good job, Deb. Good job.
Thanks, bro. Appreciate it. Okay, so I just did another request. So we should be able to come over here. Why is it not working? Let's do another one just in case. There we go. That worked.
Yeah, because the first one you're getting a cookie, right?
I
And then
think
the
that you are
second time-
correct. That is exactly right. So, awesome observation. Like I said, the first time you visit, you don't have a cookie. So it gives you a cookie. And if we'll look at this code over here, this says if a cookie exists, right? That's what this is. The shorthand is if a cookie exists, print it to the console. First time I visit the page, a cookie doesn't exist, so we can't print it. The second time, the cookie does exist, so it prints this. So let's go over here and see if our new cookie matches that value. $7NLI5. 7NL, well, I guess that's a lowercase l5. So, matches. It works. It's like magic, except it's not because you know how it works. Okay, so let's go back over to our application and see if there's anything else that we want to do. I think that's mostly it. Is there anything else that I want to say? Let's go back over to this page and see if I've covered everything. So it's worth mentioning, Phil said that I shouldn't cover this, but I'm going to cover it anyway because I'm a rebel.
We've got 5 minutes.
Okay. It's cracking the whip back there. 5 minutes. Exactly.
We got about 10 minutes.
So remember how? Let's go over here.
Are you talking about Redis?
No, I'm not going to show them Redis. I'm going to show them. I'm going to talk a little bit about this value right here, this key. Okay. Is that cool?
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. He says that's fine. It's not fun anymore because it's okay. Okay, so remember I said these could be integers, right? And you're just associating these integers with some information over here, right? And this is sort of not one-to-one. It's many-to-one because many of these integers might be associated with one of these names if you've logged in multiple places, right? Okay, so it turns out, I'm going to say nobody, and it's going to be false, but almost nobody actually uses integers like this. And in fact, you can look at the source code for connect, which is the middleware that Express uses, and find out exactly what it uses, right? So it uses this big, nasty string here. And what this string is, you might be asking yourself, okay, that's not an integer. What is that? What is that big, nasty string? So this is sort of way beyond the scope of most of this stuff, but it's good for you guys to get a little glimmer into what's going on behind the scenes here. So there's actually this function in Express called utils.uid. You pass it a number of characters, and it spits back a string that long. Okay? And the idea is here, remember, What we actually care about, and the reason that we might use integers like this, is if somebody comes to our website, we don't want to give them somebody else's cookie value, right? Because if we did that, then they would be logging in as somebody else. So the very most important thing here in creating this value in this cookie is that it must be unique, okay? And the way that Express actually accomplishes that is using something called an SHA-1. Who here has heard of SHA-1? Cool. 2 people, including Phil. So SHA-1 is something called, an example of something called a hash. And what a hash does is it basically takes one string and it turns it into gobbledygook. And that gobbledygook, that mess, is mostly, if you say that you want a big enough string of mess back, guaranteed to be unique.
Is that unique globally or just for the domain?
So the only thing that matters is for the domain, but if you make it big enough, it's also global. So there's also this related thing called a globally unique ID, sometimes pronounced GWID, I think, which is generated in a similar manner. So these things are used all over the place.
So theoretically, then, the GWID could be used as, I mean, you could do away with the domain level cookies, as it were, and just use a GWID that would identify us each individually, where to go.
Which is how Facebook is able to track you when you go other places. Because they're... So it's a combination of having a GWID which is strong enough to not collide with anybody else anywhere in the world, and sort of screwing around with this domain part of the cookie. So that's how Facebook is able to track you. And actually,
cookies at their very essence are not. I'm sorry to cut you off.
No, go ahead.
It just seems that cookies, at their very essence, are nefarious.
They're not necessarily nefarious. No, I mean I don't think so. What do you think?
Well, in just popular media, it's kind of considered something negative.
Right.
Like you want to turn off your cookies because of this false Shogun thing and the whole, you know, the whole deal.
Because of marketing and advertising.
The fact of the fact of the matter is, because of the thing we talked about earlier, that the internet was designed to be hypertext, just pages with links. They don't know who you are. They don't know anything. The fact that the internet was designed to run on that means that if you actually turned off your cookies, the internet would basically not work for you.
You wouldn't be able to log into any web page anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
It depends on what they're used for. You know, like
right. I mean, it's
data going back and forth.
Could be used for good, could be used for evil, and now that you're programmers, that choice is up to you. So.
Be moral programmers.
Be moral programmers. That's right. Okay, I think I'm done.
Cool. Well, so questions?
Sure. Oh yeah. Any other questions? Anybody else have any other questions?
Well, when Phil, you say you wouldn't be able to log into a website, my experience with cookies is that it just kind of knows who I am, so that I don't have to enter and password. Is there something else going on?
It's not just that, because it's not just that cookies don't just support a remember me function. They make it possible for one request to know that it was you who just made the other request to log in the same session. So like in one sitting at your computer, that would stop working. So without a lot of re-engineering on the
Right, exactly. So there's actually, it's not entirely true that the internet would stop working necessarily if you didn't have cookies. There's actually something built into HTTP called HTTP authentication. But the problem is that back in the 90s, somebody somewhere, probably the people at Netscape, decided that they would not use HTTP authentication and they would use cookies instead.
It was Netscape.
Was it Netscape? Okay. Damn Mark Andreessen. These while we have cookies.
What's a good way to analyze the data that cookies gives you?
I mean, there's like programs that let you like see your cookies, but I mean it's all like
Right. So maybe the simplest way is so there are sort of two answers to that, right? On the server, you can't know what they're tracking. You can't know what they're storing about you unless they share it with you. But in your browser, you can do this inspect element thing, which brings up the whatever this is called, developer tools, and you can go, damn, look at that. You can go and open up this cookie thing. Why are there so many cookies? Oh, because I went to Stack Overflow. Look at that. So you can at least open this up and see how many cookies you have, what domains they're registered with, and what sort of information. So this is the domain over here. You can't see it because it's not, Window's not big enough, but it says Stack Overflow, stackoverflow.com. So stackoverflow.com has decided that it's going to give me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 cookies.
leave that one underscore GA is Google.
It's probably the Google Analytics on Stack Overflow, right? And they have these values associated. So you can track that, right? You can track who has cookies on your computer and sort of what the names of those cookies are. And like Maiwo just pointed out, sometimes after you get familiar with them, you can recognize some of them by name. Like this one is Google Analytics. This one is probably also a Google Analytics cookie. I'm not sure what the rest of this stuff is. Yeah.
So, when you go to like Facebook Connect and it says 22 of your friends like this page, it's doing some cookie magic there.
It's probably usually a combination of cookies and iframes. Have you guys talked about iframes at all? No. Okay. Do you agree that that's probably what that's a combination of, Phil? I think the simplest way is cookies and iframes. Basically, what an iframe does is, remember this cookie is associated with a particular domain, right? Like that's a part of the cookie, domain string value. So the simplest way to make stuff like Facebook Connect work is you've got a domain associated with your site.
Well, this might be a little bit out of scope.
Is it? Should I not try to answer this question? Okay.
You don't have to answer it.
Okay, that's fine. Talk to me afterward and I can explain how that stuff works. Anybody else? Phil wants to tell you guys about Passport.
Yeah, I need about an hour. So
Okay.
maybe we want to take a break.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hope that was useful for you guys.
All right, so that was Waylon Flinn. Let's take a break, 5 minutes, and then we'll come back and we'll cover implementing some of this stuff for managing user sessions in Passport. And if you're watching online, we're going to take a break, and I'm going to come back with a part 2, so it'll be a different broadcast.